Welcome everybody to GoLocal Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. A little news before we go to Bolzano, Italy, to our favorite Italian right now. First up is a fiery debate between the Warwick Police Union, the FOP there, and the governor's office. Warwick Police Union has stepped forward and said, listen, we are not comfortable enforcing this new policy being implemented starting today through an executive order of the governor. We're not going to be writing tickets. We're not going to be forcing people to put on masks. The governor's office responded to that last night. See that updated story on GoLocal Live. A couple programming notes. After we go to Italy at 12 noon, we'll have Dr. Michael Fine, and he'll be giving us some updates on what's going on in Pawtucket and Central Falls. Since GoLocal wrote that story earlier in the week that identified that Central Falls has 50% more cases than the hottest spot, New York City, the state has now stopped posting the city and town data. A real shocker, refused to turn it over to us. We've requested it 5-6 times, and the state has refused to turn over those new numbers. So we don't know how much more Central Falls is exploding. And at 1 o'clock, we'll have Governor Raimondo's briefing. She'll be on live as well. So let's go to Bolzano, Italy. Rebecca Couto da Silva, thank you so much for joining us again.
And thanks for having me again.
Things are happening in Italy. Fill us in on where you are in that northern region on the Austrian border, where things are on your lockdown and what your limitations are.
Right, so earlier this week, Italy as a country entered two. I got to go to the city, some shopping 2 times, and in a bit to describe how that was. But the really exciting news is that today we got our region basically implemented its own phase 2, which looks like the rest of Italy's phase 3. A lot of things that will open in the rest of Italy on June 1st or May 25th are going to go ahead and open on Monday here. The declaration that I'm supposed to carry around with me, I don't have to. None of us have to carry it around anymore. So within this region, which means that we're basically, it's kind of like we're not under lockdown in this region because the declaration is to justify your movement, and we no longer have to justify our movements.
How big is the region?
You know, I've kind of switched to from miles to kilometers already, but I would say to drive it, to get to the border from here, you'd have to, it would take like an hour and a half on the train, maybe an hour driving, and then half an hour south, you're in Trentino. And then another maybe hour south of that, you're in Verona, which is part of Veneto. Right. So Veneto and Lombardia, the 2 regions that were the original hotspots, they kind of make a belt across northern Italy. And then there's Piemonte next to Lombardia, which has Turin in it. And then there's, I never say this one right, I'm going to just go ahead and call it FVG, next to Veneto, on the border with Slovenia, and Piemonte is on the border with France. So we're sort of like a V, and we're an autonomous province. And then Trentino below us is also an autonomous province. That status is part of a complicated deal because this is originally a German, sort of Austrian area. But we have more autonomy than many of the provinces in Bolzano. That said, the state went ahead and impugned, so basically is taking this order to court.
Wow. And talk about what limitations you now have. Most things have lifted. Do you still need to wear a mask?
Yes, so if we go out, we have to have it was a little unclear because the law itself is 50 pages. So I read about a 10-page summary of it, and sometimes it said like face protection, and sometimes it said mask, and I'm not sure if those two things are different. But if we're on like a park street, we should have, it said mask. Yeah, I think it said mask or face protection. I'm sorry. It was, I read it all in Italian at lunch. But we definitely in stores have to wear a mask. Stores are, I believe, also required. No. Stores are required to provide gloves. And then stores that offer personal services, such as a hairdresser, a beautician, are required to also provide masks. So, for example, your dog groomer now has to provide you with the mask, which is a little strange because they're not actually beautifying you, they're beautifying your dog. But that's the rule. And so people are now scrambling to get boxes of one-use masks, to get gloves. And yeah, so a lot of things are opening. Restaurants are opening on Monday, and you need to have 2 meters between tables, so 6 feet between tables. And I'm not sure how it's going to work with a mask or not, but restaurant, I mean, everything opened up. But then, for us, what feels like so much freedom, I believe, is like kind of what's being protested against in the US. So.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we can't go to restaurants beginning Monday. Certain retail aspects over the next few days begin to open up. Very strict limits. There's still 5-person limitations in gatherings, and lots of reports from lots of different businesses that they're simply not going to reopen yet for a number of reasons, for healthcare reasons, for themselves and their staff. And also, a lot of staff are making a significantly more receiving unemployment benefits than they would working full-time. And a lot of people, this is going to be very confrontational, are refusing to go back to work because they make so much more and obviously don't face a risk. So this is a complexity here. Talk about just sort of the overall atmosphere in your region based on all these new rights, new opportunities that you're able to enjoy.
Yeah, I think people are happy that it's opening up again, but it feels, it's like, oh, finally, right? You see people out, you see families out, and you started to see that as of Monday with Italy's phase 2. But I think there's also this idea that, people are concerned that everyone has to wear these one-use gloves, right? And that's just not necessarily friendly. If everyone has to use a hand sanitizer when you walk in a store, what's the point of the gloves? And so I think that people, even though we have all of these freedoms once again, people are also critical of how hard the measures still are. So you guys can go out in groups of 5. We can't. We can't see friends yet. We can see family, I guess. I didn't know. We were looking for the grandparent provision, right? But so it's different, and the rules about this much distance between table, this many people in a place, I think people are still kind of bristling at that. But the idea is people here are sort of proud, defiant. We're getting back on our feet. And, a lot of other people in the rest of Italy are very critical. And others are also just upset. Hey, why, this region gets all this special treatment.
Yeah, jealous. Just call it what it is. They're just jealous that your region is loosening things. Does it affect your daughter's school in any way?
No. So they are going to do something where, and because where it's sort of interesting is that the state is in charge of schooling. So what they're going to do is what they've planned to do, and the state could step in here with a rule saying no, but is allow, for example, schools to have 6 children in the room for homework time with a proctor, but the proctor has to be a volunteer, probably not a regular teacher. And you can see how this is all designed to sort of get around the rules, because if they use a regular teacher, then that person's working, and the Central Ministry of Education has said that the work that they can do is distance learning. So the law here was crafted very carefully. We've got daycares now that are limited to 4 kids. They should be outside. I'm sorry, schools and daycares like this will go from May 18th. But it's one of those things where you can see it's very carefully crafted to avoid bumping into the Italian law. The provisions would be only for those people who have 2 parents that are working full-time or working in the mornings, I guess. So if you had one parent who, I mean, I guess everyone, no, teachers, a teacher's kid, I don't know, would be able to take advantage of that, right? Or someone who's there, a couple businesses are going from May 18th, a couple from May 25th. So if you were more or less, I guess, furloughed until those days, you couldn't necessarily send your kid until May 25th. By then, maybe the spot is taken. So no, Olympia won't be going to school, sitting in a classroom doing homework, but some of her friends could be, yeah.
So Italy in the best of times, when Italy is really thriving, is chaotic. This sounds like chaos mixed with chaos poured on top with more chaos. Is this going to create a lot of stress and strain? Maybe less so in your region, but as the rest of the country opens up?
Yeah, I was going to say here they have sort of a Germanic sense of order, but I do believe so. I mean, there was a picture I saw of the canals in Milan where they sort of tried to mimic Venice, like Venice, California did, and dug canals and then gave up because it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Those were packed the other day, and so people are upset about that. You'll get pictures of crowds and people are just upset. I think that it's one thing to lock everybody inside, and it's another to try to detail all of the measures that have to be taken and give so little room for maneuvering. So this idea that a store has to provide these gloves and can't just give hand sanitizer on a pump, or that it has to be a mask and not a neck covering when you just distributed neck coverings a while ago, or it's neck warmer that you pull up when you pass somebody, right? So it's just one of those things where, yeah, there is now a super patchwork of laws, and the detailed provisions of how each store is to run. I think people are in some ways rolling their eyes, in other ways just really upset at how little sense the provisions make to apply to everyone.
Yeah, here it's interesting. Masks are not the preferred. People want handmade materials rather than medical masks. And the health department here has suggested not gloves, but hand sanitizer. So the science doesn't seem to be perfect and consistent around the world. Talk a little bit, Italy's death rates that got up to 1,500 and 2,000 in a day is still not gone away. It's still in the mid hundreds, right? It's 300 or 400 per day. And are people comfortable with making that transition with so many still passing?
Yeah, I think the rates are lower. I think I don't know if we ever broke 1,000, or if we did, it was very close. But our highest was around, I would say I think our peak was like between 800 and 1,000 a day. We saw a big number on May 1st or May 2nd from an adjustment that was done to include more April deaths. So the deaths have been around between 200 and 400 a day, or 1 in 400 a day. And they're still mostly concentrated in Lombardia, where Milan is. And so I think that people that are not there are just saying, well, half of these deaths are coming from a place where there's a sixth of the country's population. why is the rest of the country locked down? Yes, there are people very concerned about health. You know, a friend of mine went to buy socks the other day, and she apparently got too close to another shopper and got yelled at. And my friend was like, "I'm sorry, I just got off work. I'm a nurse. Like, I think I know the proper distance," but she didn't want to get more into it. But so yeah, there are the people that are scared. There are always people who, once a rule is made, they've decided to follow the rule and go around and make sure other people follow the rules. There's been a lot of action, I think, taken against migrants and people who are not necessarily regularized. And so it's definitely one of those things that people are ready to get out, and then others are ready to follow rules, and others are really scared, and then others are, looking for someone to blame.
Yeah, of course. All those emotions are here. Germany has announced the return of soccer. One of the first major sports leagues to begin operation again, other than, I think, Korean baseball.
Yeah.
I assume if German soccer is coming back, the pressure to bring back Italian soccer will be bubbling over at a passion level very, very shortly. Is there any official word on when AC Roma will be back on the pitch?
So I read recently that there's still infection, sickness among the Juventus players. Mm-hmm. And I believe that they had perhaps started exercising outside pursuant to some of the easings on May 4th, and that on something like May 11th, they're allowed to start practicing like by kicking balls to each other, but not getting close to each other. And there was that plan, but then you've still got players who are sick. So it's one of those things. One thing actually that, for example, here in this region, one of the rules they made is that personal service providers like hairdressers, beauticians have to provide not only masks, all the stores pretty much have to provide gloves, especially if you're selling food, but these also have to provide masks. They also have to scan their customer's temperature before performing the service.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that could, I was going to say, a measure like that, obviously, teams would have access to even more sophisticated testing than a touchless thermometer. But I could see that that's something that they would be looking at to let healthy teams play. I don't know if Juventus is out, if they're going to let other teams play, because that's unfair to Juventus. There's a lot of competition rules, unfair, and I'm talking in a sense business, unfair competition rules.
Yeah, right. Juventus got into big trouble a few years ago for fixing games, I want to say, and got demoted and then fought their way back up to the top league. But that's for another episode, Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you, as always, for joining us. Really appreciate it. And folks in Rhode Island love to hear what's going on in Italy. You guys are further ahead and obviously opening up quicker than we are. So I want to thank you once again, and hopefully we'll have you back again next week. For everybody else, 12 noon, Dr. Michael Fine, 1 o'clock, the governor's briefing. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and please stay safe.